Welcome agents. So I was going to have another video uploaded today discussing the endgame RPG aspects of the game, but it appears another topic has surfaced within the Division 2 community on the socials, and that's the Eagle Bearer controversy. Now I'd normally steer well away from this sort of thing, but it sparked a pretty healthy debate, and with a huge pass on weapons likely to happen in the near future, I think it's worth giving my 2 cents. So if you enjoy this one, drop a like down below, get involved and leave your own comments as well, and let's get right into it. So first and foremost, you may be asking what the controversy is. Well, simply put, some people think the Eagle Bearer should be nerfed, and others think it should remain as the most dominant weapon by far in the game. Now you can probably tell by my tone where my allegiance lies, but in fact, let's get this just right out of the way. I believe all weapons should be buffed up to the high ceiling of the Eagle Bearer. If I was in charge, that is exactly what I'd do, and here's why. Firstly, no one wants weapons to be nerfed. I hate nerfs, everyone hates nerfs, and actually, if you were to nerf the Eagle Bearer at this point, you'd not only cheese a lot of people off, but you'll destroy a weapon that is a very good counterbalance to some of the strongest skill builds in the game right now. Of course, this only really applies to the occupied dark zone because skill builds, especially explosive skill builds, are underpowered in normalized game modes from my own testing. Secondly, buffing all the other weapons means that we as players have a vast amount of choices instead of the standard P416 or M60 when you don't actually have the Eagle Bearer. Now, I do appreciate why some people might think the Eagle Bearer should remain as is. I really do, but to take a good example of another weapon going through a similar experience, the Lord of Wolves from Destiny 2. Now, this weapon is an absolute beast of a weapon and completely overpowered in every sense of the word. You've only got to search on YouTube for footage or just check out videos covering this weapon to know how strong it is, and more importantly, how much people hate this weapon. Even people who use it often, how much they hate this weapon. Now, I don't know if it's a community thing, but I've never heard anyone in the Destiny community say this weapon should remain as it is, because it absolutely should not, and rightly. The developers have made changes to balance this weapon. So why are people defending the Eagle Bearer? I'm generally interested to find out, because I simply cannot see it myself. And like I said, I'm not calling for the Eagle Bearer to be nerfed. I want all other weapons to come up to its level so all weapons become viable, and I cannot see why anyone could disagree with this approach. I personally cannot imagine just using one gun for all eternity and winning every PvP gunfight without any real difficulty, not due to skill, but just because you have the best weapon. This is what happened in the Division when we got the house. It wasn't quite to the same extent as the Eagle Bearer because the lightweight M4 and other weapons were close in respect of overall damage to the house, but the house was still the best weapon. The Eagle Bearer is just a different beast altogether. To give you an example of how strong this weapon is, take the P416. Now, before the Eagle Bearer was in the game, people were calling for a nerf to the P416. Why? Because it was the highest DPS weapon in the game, and no other weapons really came that close, except for some low rate fire sort of LMGs and some SMGs under the right circumstances. Now, the Eagle Bearer has about 20% more base damage compared to the P416, with the same RPM, higher magazine size, and that doesn't take into account the exotic talents. So we've got Eagle Strike, accuracy increases up to 100% as you continuously fire, so the weapon basically becomes a laser beam as you continue shooting. Headshot kills grant an additional 100% to reload speed, plus 35% damage, and tenacity is buffed for 10 seconds. 35% extra damage for 10 seconds on top of the 20% extra damage over the second best DPS weapon in the game. Okay? And then you have the second talent, tenacity, which gives you 20 to 80% of damage delay until the buff expires. But this can be mitigated by each enemy you kill while the buff is active. So here you have a weapon that you can potentially do upwards of 50% more damage than the second best DPS weapon in the game. And with tenacity active, the opportunity to almost entirely mitigate the delayed damage, which, by the way, is unbelievably strong when you consider how low the time to kill is currently. Now, the argument I see a lot to counter this argument is, well, it's an exotic and it should be stronger, otherwise what's the point of doing the raid? I'm sorry, but I think that this is a you problem. Again, take Destiny 2 for example. Do you think people are farming raids or doing the hardest content because there's a weapon locked behind these activities which completely outplays every other weapon in the game? No, they're not. People play this content to get the weapons and gear because it's unique to that activity, whether by design, talents or whatever. It's the bragging rights. It's about putting that gear on and showing it off, or using that weapon with that unique talent. The Eagle Bearer is a contradiction to the developer's own philosophy of exotics in The Division 2. The developers specifically said they didn't want exotics to just be, DPS machines or weapons, but instead wanted them to offer a new way to play the game by having unique talents, which promoted this. Look at the Pestilence, for example. This weapon has some very unique talents that offer another way to play the game. Yeah, sure, when it was released it was very underpowered in respect of damage, but now I think it's in a good place. Unique and a good alternative if you want a different way to play the game. That's what exotics are. Now, every exotic in the game, except for the Eagle Bearer, and quite possibly now the Diamondback, although I'm not going to really throw it in with this, follows the developer's philosophy of exotics within the game. The Eagle Bearer doesn't offer anything unique in respect of its talents. The Tenacity talent is almost entirely ripped out of the Division, and the Eagle Strike talent is just pure DPS inflation and just offers nothing unique. Exotics should be exactly what the developers said they should be. Unique, and offer a different way to play the game, something different. They should never be the best weapon in the game. They shouldn't be the be-all and end-all. They should be balanced, like every other weapon in the game, and obtainable for bragging rights, not so you can steamroll everyone who doesn't have it. I'd appreciate your feedback in the comments, guys. This is a very important topic because this could determine how exotics may be balanced to future updates. The way I see it is this. The Eagle Bearer is the best DPS weapon in the game by far, and locked behind an activity that is only accessible to 1% of the entire Division player base. That's not me saying I don't think the raid should reward unique weapons and gear. Quite to the contrary, I absolutely think it should. In fact, it should offer a lot more than it does now, but it still needs to be balanced. Now, this is a fact, okay? The Eagle Bearer is the best DPS weapon. So, with this in mind, all other weapons are kind of null and void unless the Eagle Bearer is nerfed or all other weapons are buffed. Now, I'd go with a huge weapon pass that buffs all weapons up to the same high ceiling as the Eagle Bearer, the same way they did this to skills with Title Update 5. This will allow variety with weapons. You shouldn't pick up, an MP5, for example, and immediately be at a huge disadvantage, especially when you consider that the Division is all about builds and having the best one. It's got nothing to do with skill. I mean, okay, that's not entirely true, but maybe 5% is about your actual skill with any build, but the other 95% is about the gear and weapon you are using. It's not like Destiny or other shooters where you can use an inferior gun, but skill can always prevail. The Division 2 does not have that. The build you run and the weapon you use is the most important factor in every gunfight, in almost every situation, which is why it's much worse when a weapon like the Eagle Bearer is so superior to every other weapon in the game. Before we end, I'd really like for anyone who thinks everything should remain as is to DM me on Twitter. No beef or anything, I'm just intrigued because I cannot understand how this could be an option. I can kind of understand those who just want the Eagle Bearer nerfed because buffing all weapons up to its DPS is kind of nerfing the weapon in many ways, but I simply cannot fathom the argument of keeping everything in the game as is, i.e. the Eagle Bearer being by far the best weapon in the game. At the end of the day, a lot of people are simply not playing PvP in this game, especially in normalized game modes where the Eagle Bearer is much more of an issue because explosive skill builds are underpowered and they're the only real counter in the occupied dark zone. Now, I played some Conflict yesterday and had one fun game where some people were, basically everyone was using LMGs, shotguns, SMGs, assault rifles, and it felt very balanced. There was no Eagle Bearer. Okay, now next game, 2 people on the other team run an Eagle Bearers, drop our whole team without even taking half damage, and the whole experience is ruined. No one wants to play against this weapon. Why? Because it's overtuned. And the developers clearly went this route with the Eagle Bearer because we as a community complained when other exotics dropped that were underpowered. Now, I love this community, guys. You know I do. This is why I make these videos. But no other community would be okay with one weapon overpowering every other weapon in the game. So why should we? Now, what I'm most concerned about with this debate now rising up on the socials is developers looking at this and trying to find a quick, simple fix, which would unfortunately be a nerf to the weapon, at least for now. I do not want this. No one wants this, and I would absolutely advocate for the developers to leave the weapon as is for now, with the intention of buffing all weapons up to this level, in an update. Anyway, guys, I've rabbled on for far too long here, and I hope I've been able to articulate my opinion on the Eagle Bearer controversy. I don't expect everyone to agree with me, but I think the points I have made are valid, and I do welcome any opposing views because that's healthy for the longevity of this community and game. Thanks if you stuck around until the end. I truly appreciate your support, and until the next one, Epic out.